Hello, 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 brothers and sisters. I love you guys. I love you guys. Today we're going to do a part 2 of the last lesson. We're going to be in 2 Samuel 14. We just verbally, skimmed through 2 Samuel 11 and 12. And we read 13 the last time. 11 and 12 dealt with David's transgression in marrying his soldier's wife after having him put on the front line to be killed. So we talked about God sending a prophet unto David, to help him understand God's conflict with David through a story. How y'all doing? How you doing, Terrell, brother? Good to see you. Good to see you. We talked about David's transgression and God sending a prophet unto David to help him see his transgression through a story where David gave a judgment that this man ought to die. And for that punishment, God said that the sword would never leave your house. So as we got into 2 Samuel 13, it started to depict, that ruling, that judgment from God starting to come upon David. David's suffering at the hands of his children who are falling, victim to lust as well at the time. Abner, Amnon, and Amnon fell passionate for his sister, his stepsister Tamar, and Absalom, which he forced his sister and caused shame to come upon her, because she valued her purity, she valued her virginity, and it really hurt her to be forced that way. So we did cover a lot of, powerful substance in it, so we looked at Absalom, avenging his sister, by killing his brother. And all of these things are weighing heavy on David because they're all his children. They're all his children. From his son, forcing his daughter, to his other son, killing that son for forcing a daughter, causing a great grief on David, right? So as we go into 2 Samuel 14, we're going to see some key points, some key lessons. It might carry into 2 Samuel 15, talking about the position of God, because we talked about there being keys in the Bible, and the key that we use for the last lesson, we're going to also use for this lesson, because David was a king, and Jesus is the King of Kings. So David was a man after God's own heart, and Jesus was the expressed image of God. So we able to plug God in the place of David to be able to understand the relationship we have as brothers and sisters in Christ in the flesh. So now we're going to watch this story continue, because after Absalom avenged his sister, he had to flee, and spend some time, as a vagabond. So maybe I'll go back to the end of 13. 34 say, but Absalom fled, and the young man that kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there came much people by the way of the hillside behind him. And Jonadab said unto the king, behold, the king's sons come as thy servant said, so it is. And it came to pass as soon as he had made an end of speaking, that behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept, and the king also and all of his servants wept very sore. He grieving the loss of two sons here. One son who was killed by his other son, avenging the wrong that happened to his sister, but also the loss of Absalom, who was caused to flee. So at 37 it says, but Absalom fled and went to Tamai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur, and David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and was there 3 years. And the soul of David longed to go forth unto Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon, seeing he was dead. This is not the first time we see this attitude of David. It's not even the first time I've seen it in real life. I've seen a situation that was very dramatic, and I seen, where a father. When did that TV come on? Hold on.
Watch Towards Zero, now streaming on BritBox, featuring the Marvel's Cast.
So I seen where, a father's son took the lives of family members, and I remember that son going to jail, and that father grieving the loss of his son. At the same time, his son had did a horrific thing, that his son was the only one that he had left out of the ordeal. So it put him in a position, to miss his son. And that's the position David is in. He's comforted concerning Amnon, because now it's up to God what happens to Amnon. While we here, this is our opportunity, to do all that we can, to be all that we could be, to make a statement before the Lord as to us being his children, but after you're gone from here, it's nothing else that could be done for you here. So David was in this place, moving on, knowing that he had a son left that he could rectify and make this thing right with. Yes. How you doing, Raquel? So it says at 14, 2 Samuel 14, it says, now Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was toward Absalom, toward his son who was still alive, and, David is a king. Everything he do is a statement into his people, right? All of his decisions, he don't think to make decisions for himself alone, because his decisions are magnified because of his position as the king, so he was perplexed in what to do. But look how the story unfolds. So Joab sent to Tekoa and fetched thence a wise woman, and said unto her, I pray thee, feign thyself to be a mourner, and put on now mourning apparel, and anoint not thyself with oil, but be as a woman that had a long time mourned for the dead. And come to the king, and speak on this manner unto him. So Joab put the words in her mouth. Right? So the key elements here, just not the, it's food in there. Key elements is, Joab want to send this message to David, right? But he say he needed to find a wise woman. We're going to look and find out how the wisdom was implemented, why it required wisdom, a woman of wisdom to be able to do it. There is a difference between the man of God and the woman of God in the way that they communicate, in the way that they go about, in the way that they, illustrate things that helps them stay in line with the will of God. So we're going to watch her exercise this wisdom and the manner in which she exercised the wisdom, right? So it says, and come to the king and speak on this manner unto him. So Joab put the words in her mouth. And when the woman of Tekoa spake to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and did obedience and said, help, O king. And the king said unto her, what aileth thee? And she answered, I am indeed a widow woman, and mine husband is dead. And thy handmaid had 2 sons, and they 2 strove together in the field, and there was none to part them. But the one smote the other and slew him. And behold, the whole family is risen against thine handmaid. And they said, deliver him that smote his brother, that we may kill him, for the life of his brother whom he slew. And we will destroy the heir also, and so there shall quench my cold which is left, and shall not leave my husband neither name nor remainder upon the earth. And the king said unto the woman, go to thine house, and I will give charge concerning thee. Okay, so let's unpack some of this right here that's taken. Oh, so the lady is telling this story, which puts her in the place of David. So David, being a king, always looked to solve matters for the people, So sometimes when we looking at a situation that is not directly involving us, we see more clearer to judge righteously concerning the situation. So this is the second time, right? David is being shown himself through an illustration. So this is how the woman is also using the wisdom, right? But the words were also put in her mouth. So we're going to continue to look at this thing. But when we look at the story for how she said it, she said she have 2 sons, and they were fighting in the field. There was nobody to stop them from fighting in the field, so that one of her sons slew the other. And now she only has 1 son left, right? And the people are outraged at him slew or slain his brother. So now they say, we have to avenge the one who is lost, so we're going to kill him and his children so that there is no heir. Now, for the judgment that's happening, people are, trying to judge the situation, but the conflict and position that she's in, right? Where she's already at a loss for a son. And now the people seek to take her only remaining son from her and his children, right? So now she don't have anything left of her husband. So this story is unfolding and it's blossoming in such a way that David's going to look at this, and choose to do the right thing concerning the woman. So we're going to see it. And the king said unto the woman, go to thine house, and I will give charge concerning thee. And the woman of Tekoa said unto the king, my lord, O king, the iniquity be on me and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless. And the king said, whosoever saith aught unto thee, bring him to me, and he shall not touch thee anymore. So, David is saying, she's saying, look, don't involve yourself. Don't put your reputation on the line. Let not the king make a decree concerning me, and let this transgression be on me and my father's house. Right? But we see David, being the king, jump right into action. He say, no, whoever says something against what I say against thee, bring him to me, and he will not do anything to you anymore. Right? So the king is saying, no, I'm absolutely ready to put my reputation on the line for you. I'm absolutely ready to make a decree concerning you. I'm absolutely ready to, take on your problems. So then she said, I pray thee, let the king remember the Lord thy God, that thou wouldest not suffer the revengers of blood to destroy any more, lest they destroy my son. And he says, as the Lord liveth, there shall not one hair of thy son fall to the earth. Right? So he put God into this. As the Lord liveth, that is an oath that he is willing to not only stand by, but die by. At this point in time, David is saying, I'm going to put my name, my reputation on the line for you. I'm putting God in this because this thing done happened to you, and I'm going to put it all on the line to make sure that your son is okay. Right? Then the woman said, let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak one word unto my lord the king. And he said, say on. So, the way that she has approached to communicate with the king was full of mercy, full of grace, soft, not demanding, not commanding, not a certain authority over the king, not certain authority over the man. She was able to do and to bring about the story the way the prophet would, but in a softer tone, in a way that's not demanding and commanding, because God not going to conflict his own word, right? It says this virtuous woman, on her lips is the law of kindness. God put men in positions to tell the people to move or else. He put men in a position, to say, the Lord had commanded thee this, in a much more authoritative position when communicating the things of God. And you see women, where men are giving commands, women are giving advice. We see places where men are making the declaration and that authority when speaking, and a woman being much more gentle in her approach, and because of her gentle approach, she was able to speak before the king. She would have never been able to do that by trying to dominate and being domineering over the king. She would have never been presented that opportunity before David to speak foolishness or to speak as if she were running the king. So look at her operating as wisdom. So the king said, say on. And the woman said, wherefore then hast thou thought such a thing against the people of God? For the king does speak this thing as one which is faulty, and that the king does not fetch home again his banished. She say, now you're willing to put your name, you're willing to put your reputation, you're willing to put your position, and not only in the kingdom, not only within Israel, but also before the Lord. You're willing to put your whole reputation on the line to save my son, right? But you the king of the people of God. Why haven't you put your name, your reputation on the line to protect your son? So she helping him to see himself in this, and this was all done under the order of Joab. So he said, his banished. She say, for we must needs die, and are as water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Neither does God respect any person. Yet doth he devise means that his banished be not expelled from him. So, we get to see as the story take place and put God in a position of David. Put David in a position of God. we see that the woman's illustration put her in the position of David. So when we look at these things, it illustrates even so much of how a lot of these lessons in the Bible are for us to put ourselves in the place of some things so that we could see, how our direction we supposed to go from where we at. Not only that, it did show how that key fit, replacing David with God, so that we could see ourselves in this illustration. And so this a powerful statement that she said. She said, don't God devise means that his banished be not expelled. It, think about that. God devise means, to get those that are cast off from him back in his presence. When I think about that word banished and expelled, they somewhat seem like synonyms, but when you look at it in the context of what's being said here, it's like the difference between being suspended from school and, expelled from school. So God is saying that, the children that are disobedient, I'm always calling out to them to bring them back. Think about that. Because when we as people today, a lot of times we like to say, we forgive, but we don't forget. I forgive you, but I don't mess with you no more. I forgive you, but I don't deal with you no more. And that's not how God forgives. God, he trying to bring you to a place to where you can be in his presence again. He trying to take you from a place of being outside of his presence and trying to usher you back into his presence. And a lot of times we don't represent God the way that we should because we don't want to reflect forgiveness the way that he forgives, right? Because it would be a very depressing thing for God to say, you know what, I forgive you, but you can't come in my presence anymore. You know what, I forgive you, but I'm not dealing with you anymore. That'll be a very depressing place for us to be if God's forgiveness was that way. Lord God say, I forgive you for what you did, but you still got to go to hell because you can't stay with me. I forgive you, but you know what? I'm not going to lead you with my spirit anymore. I'm not going to try to, you can't be in my presence. And that's the way men like to do it a lot of times. And it puts us in error, and it puts us in error. And also is a bad example to the people when we say that God will forgive you, and God will give you his spirit, and God will come to you and help you and lead you and guide you, and he will take you back, and he will, remember your sins no more, and he'll allow you to live with him in heaven. We tell people all of these things, but when it's our time to show an example of that same love, we not always as reluctant to show it as God is. But if God didn't show love to us that way, we would fault God for it. But we don't want to look in our own lives and fault ourselves for not forgiving that way. Not trying to present, a platform for a person to be able to change and come back within our presence. That's a very powerful statement. She say, how have you done this thing against the people of God? For the king does speak this thing as one which is faulty. Why? Because it's hypocrisy. The wrath of God is against all disobedient and those that hold the truth in hypocrisy. David is in a position of hypocrisy at this point because, there was wrong committed by her son, right? And now, that the people are trying to commit a judgment against her son, who may have been wrong in a situation, that in order to save the woman from more grief, David is willing to step up, put his whole name, reputation, position with God on the line to protect that woman from having to suffer more grief. But David is in this very same position with his son Absalom. You know, my son killed my son who was wrong for what he did. You know, and now my son is on the run, and I haven't went and tried to go retrieve him. I haven't tried to go and bring him back into my presence. I haven't tried to restore his reputation amongst the people. But he willing to do all of these things for a complete stranger. You know, and the things that he do, how you doing? The things that God do is an example, you know, for us all. The things that David done is listed in his Bible, his testimony within in Psalms, and his account within Samuel and Kings, and these books, you know, feed us to this day. So the things that the king did became food for us to eat from in today's time. And then so, you know, he willing to put all of this reputation on the line to help her from causing more grief, but he won't do the same for himself. He won't do the same concerning Absalom, his son. He won't do that. So, and for the people of God, because this is a good statement to be had, a good testimony to be had amongst the people of God. So she's showing David his position through this story that was illustrated or commanded to be illustrated through Job. Right? It's like, for we must needs die, or as water spilt on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Neither does God respect any person, yet doth he devise means that his banished be not expelled from him. He always trying to allow us to come back in his presence. And now we're going to look at, you know, the devastation that could be caused, right, by not forgiving the way that God forgives. You know, we're going to look at the backlash. We're going to look at the things that could happen when we don't, you know, try to make ways for our banished not to be expelled from us. So we still going to be able to learn from David with the decisions that he made. You know, we can still going to be able to learn through the things that transpired within this event. So, you know, we could take a look at it, because when people say, you know what, I forgive you, but I don't deal with you no more, don't come around me no more, you know what, I forgive you, but I wouldn't spit on you if you was on fire. You know, we have that type of heart, but God say, when I forgive you, I remember your sins no more. When God forgive you, he allow you to come back in his presence. He willing to bring you back to a position to where he willing to be united with you, where he willing to invest his spirit in you. When we look at Paul, you know, in the time where he was Saul, he was killing God's anointed. He was killing God's anointed and hunting down God's anointed. Yet God devised means that his banished be not expelled, because not only did he forgive Paul, but he brought Paul in. You know, he united with Paul. He gave Paul his spirit. You know, he gave Paul a purpose, and he accepted Paul into the kingdom. Think about that. From the position that Paul was in the beginning of us hearing about him being Saul, to what God was able to do through him being Paul, there was somebody who was doing great things against God, who God still put his name, his reputation, his power on the line to bring Saul to him, right? To unite with Saul, to become one with Paul. So, you know, we looking at God's way of doing things, and when we do things opposite of the way God do things, we could cause, you know, we'll see. We're going to see what it could cause. It say, now therefore I am come to speak of this thing unto my lord the king. It is because the people have made me afraid. And thine handmaid said, I will now speak unto the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his handmaid. For the king will hear to deliver his handmaid out of the hand of the man that would destroy me, and my son together out of the inheritance of God. That thine handmaid said, the word of my lord the king shall now be conformable. For as an angel of God, so is my lord the king to discern good and bad. Therefore the Lord thy God will be with thee. See how she put him in a position of God? You know, my Lord the King, David, being a man after God's own heart, right? It says, now the word of my Lord the King shall now be conformable. Now the judgment of the king concerning his handmaid could be conformed into his own situation. See, that's what it means to be a righteous judge. A righteous judgment stands no matter who's in the midst of it. If your situation was the same as my situation, and I judge it this way for your situation, that's the same way I should judge it for my situation. If me and you dealing with the same situation and I'm judging it one way for me, I ought to judge it the same way for you. Because when you don't, the Bible call it unbalanced weights. It say an unbalanced weight and an unbalanced judgment is an abomination to God. So when you say, you know what, they steal, it's wrong. But when I steal, I got a better reason than they got. They wrong, but I'm not. You know, that's an unbalanced judge. So she's saying to the king, look, your judgment concerning what you would do on behalf of your handmaid, let that information be conformable. Let that judgment be a judgment that stands even when it's not my situation and it's your situation. Or it's not our situation, but it's their situation. That same judgment ought to stand. So she say, take your judgment and make it conformable. He say, because David is a man after his own heart. As an angel of God, so is my Lord the King, with the ability to discern good from bad. Therefore the Lord thy God will be with thee. Right? She didn't tell him this the decision that you need to make, this what you better do, this what you ought to do, because she had the wisdom of a woman. She had the wisdom of the woman. She get advice and allow the king to make the ruling decision, not taking him out of position, the king, to be the king for a second, to rule over the king, but to allow herself from her position to give advice to the king and allow it to be up to him what to do. See how she didn't go and tell him, you better do this, you ought to do this, you're this, because she is a woman of God. She is a woman with the wisdom and the knowledge to know how to operate. You know, we got to learn these things, because when it comes to how someone do something, that's the spirit in which it was done, right? The what to do is just the action of what's being done. But when we talk about how they did what they did, we talking about the spirit in which they done it in. Think about that. This woman is not operating in the spirit of a certain authority over the man. She coming from a position as to hand up the advice to the king and allow it to be up to him. He say, so now, therefore, you are as the Lord, right? As an angel of God, so is my Lord the King to discern good for bad. Therefore the Lord thy God will be with thee. Then the king answered and said unto the woman, hide not this from me, I pray thee, the thing that I shall ask thee. And the woman said, let my Lord the king now speak. And the king said, is not the hand of Joab with thee in all of this? And the woman answered and said, as thy soul liveth, my Lord the king, none can turn to the right hand or to the left from aught that the Lord my king has spoken. For thy servant Joab, he bade me and put all these words in my mouth of thine handmaiden. To fetch out this form of speech had thy servant Joab done this thing, that my Lord is wise according to the wisdom of an angel of God, to know all things that are in the earth. Right? So David is saying, man, hold up, I know you didn't do this on your own. tell me now, is Joab behind you coming to me to tell me this? Because this same Joab it just had to come to David to show him himself and his transgression against the Lord, dealing with Bathsheba, right? So now, instead of Joab coming to do this thing again, he sent in by the hand of this woman who operated with the wisdom of God and how to present this as a woman, but not as Joab. So, man, you know what? We might go back. It wasn't set to really illustrate that point, but we might go back. Let me see. And illustrate, how Joab came at David when he did it himself. Never thought about that, but if what we saying is true, then it should show. Let's look at this thing. All right. Nathan. Okay, Nathan. Okay. So, my bad, not Joab, but Nathan came. But we still going to be able to see the difference between the man coming to do this bidding and the woman coming to do this bidding. Okay, so 2 Samuel chapter 12 at verse 1, it says, And the Lord sent Nathan unto David, and he came unto him and said unto him, There were 2 men in one city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had exceeding many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing, save one little ewe lamb, which he had bought and nourished up, and it grew together with him and with his children. And it did eat of his own meat and drank of his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and was unto him as a daughter. And there came a traveler unto the rich man, and he spared to take of his own flock and of his own herd to dress for the wayfaring man that was coming to him, but took the poor man's lamb and dressed it for the man that was come to him. And David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he said unto Nathan, As the Lord liveth, the man that hath done this thing shall surely die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. And Nathan said unto David, Thou art the man. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. And I gave thee thy master's house and thy master's wives into thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have moreover given unto thee such and such things. Wherefore hast thou despised the commandment of the Lord, to do evil in his sight? Thou hast killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and hast taken his wife to be thy wife, and hast slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from thine house, because thou hast despised me, and hast taken thee wife of Uriah the Hittite to be thy wife. Thus says the Lord, Behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house, and will take thy wives before thine eyes, and give them unto thy neighbor, and he shall lie with thy wives in the sight of the sun. For thou didst it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. And David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said unto David, The Lord also had put away thy sin. Thou shalt not die. Howbeit, because of this deed, thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme. The child also that is born unto thee shall surely die. See, what I tell you, the king's actions, the king's declarations, the thing that the king do is a statement for all of the people. He rules over the people. Jesus Christ is King of Kings. He ruled over the people, but he only did the things that were necessary for him to be a good example for us and the things that we should do. There were things that Jesus never had to do that he done because he wanted us to do it. There were things that Jesus could have done, but he didn't do because he didn't want us to do it. As the King of the Jews, right? Jesus only displayed character that we should mimic. He says, often as you do this, when he was having a supper, he says, often as you do this in remembrance of me. talking about the drinking and the eating and drinking of the wine. A good thing that it say about wine in Proverbs 20 verse 1 is wine is a mocker. So when he say do this in remembrance of me, he's saying mimic me, mock me. Do what I do. Love what I love, hate what I hate. Right? So we look at this. So God got to punish David openly for what he done secretly, because since what David's actions gave occasion to the enemies to blaspheme God, God got to punish David in the sight of all of them so that they know that God will come for you. So God has always got to be this example, and a man of God, a preacher, or any kind of, anywhere in the body of Christ, is somebody looking on you, to say, well, they do it, I could get away with it. They love God, God accept them, so if they could do it, I could do it. And God got to come back sometimes when we putting the wrong thing out there for people to see and punish us in the sight of all of them, so they know, like, you know what, God ain't letting this slide. You know what, they did it, but God didn't let them make it either. Look at what happened to the angels. It said if God had, not spared his angels, who left their first estate, how much more us? So look at this correlation. It's saying, look, God made an example out of the angels to teach us a lesson. God will make an example out of you to teach somebody else a lesson. God made an example out of somebody else so you could see a lesson, but if you don't get it, eventually you will become the example, especially when you carry yourself as a person of God and saying, I'm a woman of God, I'm a man of God, I'm a child of God, I believe in God, I'm part of the faith, I'm a Christian. You put these things out there, but when your conduct goes against that which God said is in the conduct of his children, then you mislead other people to feel like, well, I could do it, they doing it. God got to come back and turn your life up in front of them so they can see, well, maybe you can't do it. So think about that. But look at the different type of authority that the man is speaking in, versus the gentleness and the, more like advice that the woman is speaking in. The whole Bible, they're never going to overstep those boundaries. The whole Bible, none of the women of God are going to ever overstep those boundaries. And the men of God are going to always respect these boundaries, because these are the different positions that God have. This Bible really doesn't contradict itself at all. It really doesn't contradict itself at all. And it's best for us to learn about what we're supposed to do, and not only what we're supposed to do, but the way we're supposed to do it. Because we have to do what we're supposed to do. That's the truth, right? It's what God had built for us to do. When we do it, we are accepted and acknowledged of him, So these are things that we could truly do and be accepted of God, right? And then there are some things that we can't truly do and be accepted of God. That's a lie. So when we doing what God tell us to do, that we living in truth. But when we do it the way he told us to do it, we doing it in spirit. He say, this is the type of worship that the Father seeks. He seeks those who will worship him in spirit and in truth. That's going to do his word, his will, the way he told us to do it. He said, I want you to give cheerfully. See, the do is to give. That's what I want you to do. But if you do it bitter, how am I going to get the glory? See, if I'm going to really get the glory, I'm going to need you to do it in spirit and in truth. I need you to give cheerfully. I need you to be a cheerful giver. What spirit do I give in? Cheerfully. What do I do? Give. So this is the spirit and truth. Nobody gonna overstep the bounds that was accepted of God. So we was able to take a look at this, and I never meant to go here today, but it will feed you if you allow it. It'll feed you if you allow it. Look at the different substance in the way this man presented what he had versus the way that this woman operated, given the knowledge, doing the same thing, doing the exact same thing, being able to illustrate this thing to David, help David to see himself in it, but done it with a lot less authority, much more gentleness, and a different substance as versus authority. That man went and straight said, David, the man is you. You've done this and caused this and that's the thing that God want to see the man do, because God allowed men got killed for doing this type of stuff. People were sawed in half, beheaded, hung on crosses, all for doing that type of stuff. God say, I want the man to do it. This is a spiritual battle. We all soldiers, but God got a place that he want the man to be in the battle, and he got a place for the woman to be in the battle. Right? And you say, well, no, it don't got to be like that. Everybody can do what they want in the battle. There's no battle works like that. And it's if you say, look, if I heard somebody breaking into my house, right, I'm gonna send my wife to the door. If that's what you say you wouldn't do, like if you heard somebody breaking in your house, when you wouldn't send your wife to the door to see who it is, then why would you, take this spiritual battle, which is bigger battle than that battle, and send your wife to go see who it is breaking in the door? Why would you do it? We wouldn't do it. We'll feel like, what, that's wrong for a man to do that. No real man to do that. You don't want nobody to do that to your daughter. Somebody breaking in the house, they send your daughter to the door. Go see who it is. You wouldn't want that to happen. So why God say that the devil is wreaking havoc and trying to destroy and kill and do this, that he said, I want this, the position I want you to do. And you said, I'm going to send my wife to the door. That ain't what God asked us to do. But God used male vessels and female vessels. But the way that we had to do the work was always in the spirit that he gave for us to do it in. And I don't care how many pages you flip in this Bible, you're not going to find a contradiction unless you go to a version that altered certain things to bring about their own feelings. So, okay. We went there. Okay. Let's see. She said, then thine handmaid, back at 17 of 2 Samuel 14, then thine handmaid said, the word of my Lord the king shall now be conformable. For as an angel of God, so is my Lord the king to discern good from bad. Therefore the Lord thy God will be with thee. Lift it up to him to make the decision. Then the king answered and said unto the woman, hide not this thing from me, I pray thee, this thing that I shall ask thee. And the woman said, let my Lord the king now speak. And the king said, is not thine hand of Job with thee in all of this? And the woman answered and said, as thy soul liveth, my Lord the king, none can turn to the right or from the left of aught that the Lord my king has spoken. For thy servant Joab, he bade me, and he put all these words in my mouth of thine handmaid. To fetch out this form of speech had thy servant Joab done this thing. And my Lord is wise, according to the wisdom of an angel of God, to know all things that are in the earth. And the king said unto Joab, behold, now I have done this thing. Go therefore, bring this young man Absalom again. So now David is taking this advice and know he going to retrieve his banished. And it's a And Joab fell to the ground on his face and bowed himself and thanked the king. And Joab said, today thy servant knoweth that I have found grace in thy sight, my lord, O king, and that the king had fulfilled the request of his servant. So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. And the king said, let him turn to his own house, and let him not see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and saw not the king's face. Here we go. We about to see what happens when you forgive, but you won't allow that person back into your presence, right? We about to see what you forgive, but you don't do it the way God forgive, who forgive and remember your sins no more, and bring you back into his presence and give you his spirit and bring salvation to you after you had went into the world and done all kind of manner of wickedness. You know, God is willing to forgive you, you know, let go of the transgression, bring you in and be one with you. But now we about to see the king take a different approach. He went and retrieved his son because of the lesson, but he didn't want to fully put his name on the line for his son. He didn't want to fully put his reputation on the line for his son. And we're going to see what are the consequences of not doing this thing the way God do it. Because as the king, the David is in the position of God, who is the King of Kings. So now it's a and the king said, let him turn to his own house and let him not see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and saw not the king's face. But in all Israel there was none to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty. From the sole of his foot even into the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. And when he polled his head, you know, put his hair back into a ponytail. You know, a lot of people, they judge according to the outward appearance, and they want to be ruthless as to a man with hair ain't a man of God. You know, they might have been listening to those ruthless pastors who judge according to the outward appearance, which the Bible instructs us not to do, you know. But we look at Absalom have hair. And when he polled his hair, because it was heavy upon him, therefore he polled it, he weighed the hairs of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight. And unto Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of fair countenance. So Absalom dwelled 2 full years in Jerusalem and saw not the king's face. You know, therefore Absalom sent for Joab to have him send to the king, but he would not come to him. And when he sent again the second time, he wouldn't come. So now, you know, y'all brought me all the way back here to still shut me out from your presence. So now we finna see how this thing is going to affect Absalom. So, okay. Therefore, Absalom sent for Joab to have sent him to the king, so he could see his daddy, right? Who God is our father. Say, but he would not come to him, and when he sent again the second time, he would not come. Therefore he said unto his servant, see, Joab's field is near mine, and he had barley there. Go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servant set the field on fire. Then Joab arose and came to Absalom unto his house, and said unto him, wherefore have thy servant set my field on fire? So now that you affected by what I done sent my servant to do, now you willing to come to me. I've been sending for you. You won't come, but now your field is on fire, you come. Look at this. Now, this thing is not just something that is affecting David anymore. It's something that is starting to affect Absalom, to be brought back. You know, to be seemingly restored back into his position. But to not be restored to his position is starting to affect Absalom. It says, then Joab arose and came to Absalom into his house, and said unto him, wherefore hath thy servant set my field on fire? And Absalom answered Joab, behold, I sent unto thee, saying, come hither, that I may send thee to the king, to say, wherefore am I come from Geshur? It had been good for me to have been there still. Now therefore let me see the king's face, and if there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me. He said, man, it would have been better for you to either leave me there, or to be better for me to die than to be back but not accepted. He said, man, I've been here 2 years. I've been hoping that my relationship could be restored. I was hoping that God, that David, who is the king in a position of God in this story, you know, will accept me again. But he brought me back to not accept me again. This thing started affecting him. Now he gotta, I want to see my daddy. I want to see my father. And so he's sending for a person to make a request to see his father, but, they had shut him off. Now his heart done got angry, and now we done set the man field on fire. Now the man come to see me, and I'm telling him, what is the purpose of you even bringing me back here? You should have left me where I was on the run. If you wasn't going to allow me to be restored back into your presence, back into your grace, back into good standing with you, why did you bring me? So let me see my daddy, and if he ain't satisfied with me, let him kill me. This is the position. This is the change of heart. Absalom was not a man with an evil heart. Absalom was not a man who was evil at all. Absalom was a man of God whose virginity was forced out of her against her will, and over time, looking at the devastation and the effect that this thing had on his sister, say, I'm going to avenge my sister. And when he had avenged his sister, it put him in a conflicting position within his own family to where he take off running. And David is like, man, I'm losing all of my family. My daughter not the same. My son is dead. My other son is on the run. David was able to get a satisfaction after knowing to know that his son was okay, because his son was brought back in the area around him to where he could have word and he could have knowledge of his well-being. But he didn't usher him back into the presence of himself. He didn't restore their relationship back. He didn't allow it to be available to him for the relationship to be stored as if it once was, when that's exactly what God is doing for us. He taking people who never had a relationship with him and bringing them unto him for them to have a relationship with him, having been out in the world doing all kind of wickedness. So now we're looking at David in a position of God make not so good decisions that's going to have a effect on him and cause him more grief. Because when we don't do this thing, when we say we do the things, all right, when we say we're going to do the things that God want us to do, but we don't do them the way God want us to do it, then we're going to face consequences for our error, because we are supposed to be like him. We are supposed to be being conformed into the image of Christ. So, we have to do the things that we're supposed to do in the spirit. We're supposed to do it. And since David is not forgiving his son in the way that God do it, when he devise schemes that his banished be not expelled from him, then we could cause a great chaos in the heart of the people or the subject of the forgiveness. And now we're going to watch this. Therefore, and Joab arose and came to Absalom unto his house, and they said, wherefore hath thy servant set my field on fire? And Absalom answered Joab, because I sent unto thee, saying, come hither, that I might send thee to the king, to say, wherefore am I come from Geshur? It had been good for me to have been there still. Now therefore let me see the king's face, and if there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me. Now Joab came to the king and told him, and when he had called for Absalom, he come to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king. And the king kissed Absalom. And it came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. And it was so that when any man had a controversy came unto the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, of what city art thou? And he said, thy servant is of one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom said unto him, see, the matter are good and right, but there is no man deputed to the king to hear thee. Absalom said moreover, oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which had any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice. So now we look over the span of these 2 years where David went and retrieved his son, but then allowed him back into his prison, how this started to affect Absalom to the point to where he feel like his father is not just to be in a position that he in. So now he feel like he will be someone better to be in his father's position. So now we looking at this thing of jealousy. Yes, sir. Praise the Lord. How you doing, fam? And so now we looking at this thing of jealousy. Now we looking at spite. See, when we don't do this or do or forgive the way God forgive, it come up with backlash for us. It come up with, look, when you say I forgive you, but I don't mess with you no more, you can't call me. If you was on fire, I wouldn't spit on you to put it out. You know, even though we allow people to say I'm not holding it against you no more, we immediately after that show them how we holding it against them still. Right? So even though we told them we forgive them, how can their heart be, toward us? Because everything we show them after that is a lack of love, is a lack of compassion, is a lack of empathy. We tell them I forgive you, like we showing empathy, compassion, and forgiveness, but immediately after that, we show them the opposite. So when we put people in that position to say, yeah, I forgive you, but I don't fool with you no more, I wouldn't help you if you was the last person on earth, then, how could their heart be toward us? Even though we appeared to say, yeah, we forgive you, we put them in a position for their heart to turn against us. So now this is the position of David. So it said, Absalom said, moreover, oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which had any suit or cause might come unto me, that I would do him justice. And it was so, that when any man came nigh unto him to do obedience, he put forth his hand and took him and kissed him. And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. And it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said to the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow. And I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. For thy servant vowed a vow while I abode in Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. Then the king said unto him, go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as ye hear the sound of the trumpet, then you should say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. And with Absalom were 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city even to Gilo, when he offered sacrifices, and conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. And there came a messenger to David, saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, arise, let us flee, for we shall not escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us and smite the city with the edge of the sword. So look how much and how fast these tables have turned on David. Because he decided to go get his son, bring him back, but not allow the unity between him and his son to conspire. So over the course of 2 years, his son's heart turned against him. So he go and make his way to the king, and he kind of sort of start to fill the king's position in the hearts of the men. And now he's separated from the king to finish building up his, somewhat of a kingdom, to his rulership, to finish settling it in. And this put David in a position of now David has got to run from his son, who he could have just brought back into his love and grace. He could have just brought him back into his presence and received him again. But he brought him nearer, but didn't let him into his presence, didn't allow the unity to take place. And now his heart is a totally changed heart. Now, over this changed heart, over the course of 40 years, he finally in a position that he needs to be to overtake David, so to say. So David is like, David is a man of war. He came up with war. He developed his name through the slaying of Goliath. Songs were made about him and the warrior he was. He even, had Saul in a position to where Saul could have fell to the sword of David, but he had mercy not to touch God's anointed. Now we're looking at David's son, heart against David. And David he want to flee. It's no way that this situation could end up benefiting David, right? I'm a man of war. I could stand up and fight, but if I do, it's my son that I'm fighting against. You know what? I'd rather run, keep my life and my son alive, than to fight my son and overtake him. Now, to the people, this will be a sign of weakness from David. Stand and fight. We the people of God. Why would we run? But to David, it's no win situation. And I don't know how far I'm going to go, but this thing just continued to unfold and unfold. And David said unto his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, Arise, let us flee, for we shall not escape from Absalom. Make speed, depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. And the king's servant said unto David, Behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. They're ready to go to war. And the king went forth, and all his household after him, and the king left 10 women, which were his concubines, to keep the house. And the king went forth, and all the people after him, and tarried in a place that was far off. And all his servants passed on beside him, and all the Cherethites, and all of the Pelethites, and all of the Gittites, 600 men which came after him from Gath, pressed before the king. Then said the king to Ittai the Gittite, Wherefore goest thou with us also? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and also an exile. Wherefore thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us? Seeing I go whither I may, return thou and take back thy brethren. Mercy and truth be with thee. And Ittai answered the king and said, As the Lord liveth, and as my lord the king liveth, surely in what place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. And David said unto Ittai, Go and pass over. And Ittai the Gittite passed over, and all his men and all the little ones that were with him. Right? So now we're looking at David, look at a man that's exiled. Right? And now having the compassion and the mercy to walk with him. See, that's the thing that didn't take place with Absalom that caused Absalom's heart to turn against the king. But now the king is getting it right now. Right? But this thing, all of these things that were done in the previous are set in stone, and they happen for our learning, for us to learn from it. So that's why I'm pulling out the lesson that implements us in this as children of the king, the God, right? So it's and all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over. The king also himself passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. And lo, Zadok also and all the Levites were with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up unto all the people that had done passing out of the city. And the king said unto Zadok, Carry back the ark of God into the city. If I shall find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me again and show me both it and his habitation. But if he does say, I have no delight in thee, behold, here am I. Let him do to me as seemeth good unto him. Now this is the same thing David is saying that I remember hearing Eli say when Samuel was prophesying to him. It is God. Let him do what seemeth good unto him. Willing to suffer the consequences of God. God said, if you take the chastisement of the Lord, he deal with you as sons. And we looked at Eli and David both with the same heart. Right? The king said also unto Zodek the priest, art not thou a seer? Return into the city in peace, and your two sons with you, Ahimaaz, thy son, and Jonathan, the son of Abiathar. See, I will tarry in the plain of the wilderness until there come word from you to certify me. Zodek therefore and Abiathar carried the ark of God again into Jerusalem, and they tarried there. And David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives and wept as he went up, and had his head covered, and he went barefoot, and all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and they went up weeping as they went up. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. And it came to pass that when David was come to the top of the mount where he worshipped God, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat rent and the earth upon his head, unto whom David said, if thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden on me. But if thou return to the city and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, as I have been thy father's servant hereunto, so will I now also be thy servant. Then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. I might be saying it different every time, but some of these names I can't pronounce. The importance is in the lesson. And hast thou not been here with Zadok and Abiathar the priest? Therefore it shall be that whatsoever thing thou shalt hear out of the king's house, thou shalt tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priest. Behold, they have there with them their two sons, Ahimaaz and Zadok's son, and Jonathan Abiathar's son. And by them ye shall send unto me everything that ye hear. Right, so look, I'm not going to read all of it. But in this thing, David ends up having to go to war with his son. David don't go to war himself. But when he's sent to go to war with his son, he say, hey, whatever you do, don't kill my son. And the first thing they do is kill his son. Supposing that, they were going to come back and bring David glad tidings, saying all the king's enemies are dead. David didn't take that the way that the people thought that he would took it. No, let's stop. Because when I did end up going to, 2 Samuel chapter 12, where Nathan is prophesying, he say that men is going to lay with your wives in the sight of the sun, right? So, yeah, David's son ended up sleeping with David's wives. And then, the war take place where David saying, whatever you do, don't kill my son. The first thing they do is kill his son. And they come to bring him glad tidings, say, you know what, all the king's enemies are dead. And David, where he should have been rejoicing, when we read the Psalms all of the times that David is rejoicing in God, delivering him from his enemies or delivering his enemies into his hand, where he would make songs and rejoice about it. This wasn't one of those times, because David was greatly affected by what was done. And what was done could have been prevented had he had for giving his son and allowed that union to take place with his son when he retrieved his banished. So now he's suffering at the hands of not making the right decision. And this is God's judgment unfolding unto him. And that judgment never stopped, because all of the Jews, all of Israel is a part of that house of David. You know, and that sword never departed out of the midst of Israel. And not just David's immediate house. Even to this day, we watching the sword not depart out of the house. Because the thing that the king did, it kept growing in the earth. It's still this judgment is still being performed in the earth today. I don't know if I'm going to do a lesson about that to really just illustrate that or not. You know, let God lead me when it's concerning it. But David, when they came and brought David that news, David was so sad. So his servants was like, hey, it's like you rather we had died in that battle than your enemies. So it's like, man, we put our life on the line and fight for the king. And you act as if you rather they lived than we died. You know, and it's too much pressure on David for David to even deal with this right now. So David would draw himself into a solitary state, you know, and call for the children of Judah, and why y'all didn't come get me? You see what I'm going through, man. Y'all should have sent for me and came and got me. I need y'all. And they came and got David, you know, and David was separated, you know, from the people who fought for him because it's just so much pressure. You know, it was no win in it for David, you know, and if we go about forgiving people, but, you know, treating people that way and not allowing to usher them in and not giving them a way into unity with us, if we don't build a way into our loving kindness, then these people are going to do the same thing. And we not representing God anymore, we represent us, because God devised means that his banished be not expelled. Yeah, man. Our sin had hid his face from us. A lot of times we out there in the world, God say, I don't come near the wicked. We say, I'm going to be this. God say, don't be that. We say, I don't care, I'm going to be it anyway. And God just can't even come near us. But he always putting something before us in our life, trying to motivate us to come to him. And no matter how much of that stuff we was out there doing, if we do actually come to him, not only will he forgive us, but he'll allow us to create a unity with him. He'll come and make his spirit one with us. You know, he allows and ushers us into his presence. You know, so if we're going to do it, let's do it the way God do it, because God devises means that his banished be not expelled. I love you guys. Talk to you soon.